Hello, my name is Simon Double, and welcome to Inside the Rails, a monthly podcast for horse racing enthusiasts everywhere. And as ever, I'm joined by Phil Boyle from BG Racing. Hi, Phil. How are things?
Hi, Simon. All good, thanks. Really enjoying this summer weather that we've seen since our last recording. Been enjoying that both on and off the racecourse.
Yes, in fact, we both enjoyed a day in the sun when, coincidentally, we both had runners at Lingfield recently, but more of that later. Now, look, I'm aware that you like golf, and you and your team at BG Racing did rather well recently at the RSA golf competition. So come on, Phil, don't hide your light under a bushel. Tell us all about it.
All right, then, if I must, yes. Dan Abraham, the chairman of the Racehorse Syndicates Association, has been suggesting that we run a syndicates golf day for a while, and this year he decided to organise one, and a very good job he did as well. It was organised at Oxley Park in Wolverhampton. I think we had 7 teams of syndicate managers and shareholders there. I had 3 of my shareholders with me. We had a lovely morning because we all played well. That always helps.
Yeah.
But it did end up being a little bit of an RSA committee carve-up because my team won. I had a lucky shot on one of the par 3 holes and won the nearest to pin competition, and our committee colleague Tommy Williams, the assistant general manager at Warwick Racecourse, who also runs Premier Thoroughbred Racing Syndicates, he won the longest drive competition. But most importantly, everyone had a good day. It was great to chat with the other syndicate managers and members, and I'm sure it will go from strength to strength next year.
Excellent. I'm not a golfer myself, but it sounds like you all had a lovely day. Well done. Now, apart from golf, another interest of yours is walking, and I hear you've been out walking the Thames Path.
Yeah, I was out in Oxfordshire last weekend. We walked from Wallingford to Oxford in 3 stages, spread over 3 days. So, we've been walking the Thames Path since 2017 when we were staying up in London for the World Athletics Championship. So we started at the Thames Barrier then, and we've been tackling sections over various weekends since. But as we get out in the country, the logistics get a bit more tricky. It's easy at the start. You've got tubes, trains and buses to get to and from your start and finishing points. But we're now ending up in places where there's only a couple of buses a day and they don't always go where you need them to get to. So it takes quite a bit of planning.
Well, look, we wish you the very best of luck with that.
Yeah, just over 50 miles to go, though, so not done yet. Current progress, it might take us a few years yet, 2017 to 2022, but there you go. Anyway, speaking of being out and about, when we met at Lingfield, you just called in at home for a change of clothes, because I think you'd been away yourself for a few days. So that was the week when you went around the country with a visit to Darley Stud and some hospitality with your owners at Warwick Races. How did that all go?
Yes, it was rather a full week. As I say, my grandmother used to say, when you're really busy, you'll meet yourself coming back. And I did feel a bit like that. Tarantino, the nice 2-year-old that we have in training with Amy Murphy, was due to make his debut at headquarters at Newmarket, but he got rather upset in the preliminaries and he had to be withdrawn, which was disappointing, but just one of those things. But I always look for silver linings, and the silver lining for me was that I was already in situ at Newmarket for a visit with some owners to Godolphin Starley Stud the following day. And I have to say, they really put on a show. It was a marvellous visit. Franziska Kirtland-Coffey, who's the nominations lady for German-speaking people. She's actually Swiss herself, but she guided us round, and we had a fabulous morning looking at all the great stallions that Darley have, including the all-conquering Dabawi. Now, his covering fee is, it's pretty eye-watering. Do you want to have a guess what it is, Phil? But by covering fee, that's the fee that the breeders of the dams, the female horses, when they go to get covered by the stallion, that's what they have to pay. Do you want to have a guess what it is?
Yeah, I don't know specifically, but I know some of the top stallions amazingly to here run into 6-figure covering fees. It's one of those old adages, if you have to ask the price, you probably can't afford it. So, I'm sure you've asked, though. Do you have the accurate figure?
I do. It's $250,000.
Wow.
And he covers 4 times a day. The alarm clock goes off for Dubawi just before 7 o'clock. He starts at 7, and his 4th covering is at midnight. And he and these other stallions are often covering 6 days a week.
Yeah, that is. That's long hours. I'm not sure whether they see that as work or not, but they're putting in more hours than I managed to, and I thought I was pretty dedicated to my job.
Yeah, well, as somebody once said, nice work if you can get it, as a stallion. Anyway, back to the racing, away from the breeding, back to the racing. On the Saturday after that, one of my owners was celebrating 50 years of his insurance company. at Newbury Races, and he'd asked me to put together a sort of package and host the day for his staff. There were around about 30 of them, many of them quite young, and half of them had never been racing before. So that was a little bit challenging for me, but I really enjoyed the challenge. And more importantly, they enjoyed the day, and so did my owner, Christopher Trigg, and managed to get some of them into the paddock to give them a taste of what owning a racehorse can be about. So that was really good fun. Then on the Tuesday, it was up to Warwick Races for the following day with some of my owners. A bit of a jolly, didn't have a runner. That's obviously a jumps course. And you mentioned Tommy Williams earlier on, RSA member, assistant manager. I have to say he and the team looked after us regally. They did a very good job. A couple of bottles of champagne in the box for us, which was gratis, which was lovely and well received. So look, that's a taste of what syndicate owners can enjoy if they get involved in shared ownership.
Yeah, you're spot on. It does sound like the Solario racing owners are having a lot of fun there. But yeah, meeting people in a social environment like that's a real big benefit of syndicate membership, isn't it? I mean, one of my shareholders is a widower, and just through meeting a couple of other shareholders during one of our yard visits, he's now joined their bowls club, made loads of new friends, and they all socialise both out and away from the races, which is nice. And yeah, on top of that, getting behind the scenes at the stables and events like your Darley Stud visit, that's something that racing enthusiasts really enjoy. And obviously everyone enjoys some hospitality. In fact, yeah, I've got a bunch of shareholders coming with me for a day at Royal Ascot in June, which will be nice as well.
Okay, well, I always think Royal Ascot is the best flat meeting in the world, and I'm sure you'll have a great time there. Look, still on the subject of shared ownership, it sounded like the second ownership day that took place at York. We were at Newbury, weren't we, for the first one? But the second one at York, I believe that went quite well.
Yeah, those have been organised by Great British Racing to sort of promote syndicate ownership and shared ownership to racegoers. And yeah, although neither of us was able to get to York, obviously it's a little bit far away for both of us being based in the south, but the reports I received was that it went really well with plenty of racegoers chatting to the various syndicate and racing club managers there. Yeah, and hopefully the next one will be a similar success. That's at Perth on the 18th of June. It's again a bit out of travel range for me, but I have been to Perth races a couple of times in the past, and it always seems to be well attended. It's a lovely place to visit, and I'm sure that a lot of the syndicates and racing clubs with horses in the north of England and Scotland will be at the course that day. And in my experience, most of them are like us. They're always happy to chat to anybody about shared ownership. So don't be afraid to go and talk to them if you're there.
Yes, well, Solario Racing won't be at Perth. I don't think I have a visa for that far north. But of course, Inside the Rails does have a connection with Perth, having interviewed Hazel Poplinski, CEO of Perth Racecourse. She was our second guest way back in January of last year. She was charming and, as all our guests seem to be, very informative, wasn't she?
She was. And yep, that episode will still be available on all the podcast platforms. It's well worth a listen if people haven't heard it. And I met Hazel on one of my visits to Perth several months after we recorded, and I can confirm that as well as running a very nice race course, she also does a good sideline in golf course recommendations, because my wife and I had a very enjoyable round at a local course that she suggested to us.
Excellent. One of the things I remember about that podcast was her knowledge of geography and why Perth have summer jumps racing. But it was a fascinating podcast, and as you say, you gave it a good plug. So do recommend listeners go back into that one. Now, look, we've had some great racing since our last podcast, with the English, French, and Irish 2,000 guineas all being won by Godolphin and Charlie Appleby. The horses were Caribus, Native Trail and Modern Games. In terms of the trials, just to explain a little bit about this, there's a racing calendar with fixed meetings like the Derby meeting, Royal Ascot, and there are other meetings at York and Chester, and a lot of these courses have what we call trials, which are sort of prep races for the big ones. And one of them is the York Dante meeting, which is often a pointer to the Derby and the Oaks at Epsom in early June. Well, for me, Emily Upjohn, she was very impressive in the Musadora Stakes, which is a trial for the Oaks. She's now odds on for the Oaks, having been very impressive. And the Dante Stakes, it is called the Dante meeting. That's a prep race for the Derby. And Sir Michael Stout, his Desert Crown, very impressive, winner of that race, and he's now a deserved 2-1 favourite to give Sir Michael Stout his possible 6th Derby winner, 41 years on since the mighty Shergar gave him his first blue ribbon way back in 1981 with a very young Walter Swinburne.
Yeah, the flat season certainly got into full swing, hasn't it? And as you mentioned, what an achievement it is to have three colts in the same ownership, all trained in the same yard, winning the three versions of the 2000 Guineas. And speaking of the 2000 Guineas, the German 2000 Guineas gets a lot less press than the English, Irish, and French version. So I must admit, I completely missed it. But a few days later, I was listening to a podcast reviewing the racing action, and it was mentioned that the 2000 Guineas in Germany had been won by Maljoom. Of course, I instantly recognised as the horse
really?
he told me to follow. So Simon Double tipped him after his maiden win, and he then went and won again, and now he's won a German 2000 Guineas, and that means I've now backed him no times in his three wins, and I probably should pay more attention to your wise advice in future.
Well, wise advice. That's very kind of you. Yeah, I must admit, he surprised even me. But he is a very progressive horse, and it looks like he's heading to Royal Ascot for the St James Palace Stakes, for which, if you fancy a flutter, he's a general 12-1 shot. So now, look, I know you've just said you didn't back Maljoom, but hey, look, you don't need to back horses like that when you're doing very well with your own tips, I hear.
Yeah, I have. I've been in a good run of form recently. My trainers have both been in form, so backing runners from the stables has been quite profitable when the trainers have thought that they'd go well. And despite not really doing anything different from the previous few months, I seem to have hit an absolute purple patch around the York meeting. I was actually getting quite worried that I was going to get some emails from bookmakers telling me my betting accounts were being restricted. I was doing so well.
Well, I'm glad to hear that your accountant will be happy with your turf accountant activity. Well done, Phil. We talked about being at Lingfield, didn't we, the same day? I guess you were pretty pleased with Far Too Beautiful's third.
Yeah, I was very happy with that one. Truth be told, I still think she might be better than she showed even then, but she'd had a few poor runs, and it was a big relief to see her getting back competitive, running into third there. And it's definitely onwards and hopefully upwards from there. As you know, because we met there, I had a decent group of shareholders at the racecourse. They were really pleased to see her run well. And yet again, it was probably wise words from you on the podcast last month. I was quite disappointed, but you noted that horses that win on debut must have ability, and she was kind of backing that up a little bit. And yeah, you were there because later on the card you had Twilight Bay running. I noticed she was fourth. Were you pleased with that? And what plans have you got for her going forwards?
Yeah, I was pretty happy with the run. Some of my owners weren't entirely happy about the ride, and I have to say, I've got a bit of sympathy with that. I think she should have been third at least. But anyway, it's history. We move on. She'll go to Yarmouth on the 9th of June for a day at the seaside. No, listeners, she's not giving pony rides. She may be rated 50, but she's certainly capable of winning races. So she'll be going to Great Yarmouth Racecourse, which is fairly close to the sea. Dancing in the Woods, really excited about him. He's managed to get into a big 0-95 handicap. That's for horses rated 0-95. He's rated 80, and he's going to Haydock tomorrow in a big race, £30,000 race. So by the time this podcast goes out, he'll have run. Hopefully he'll have won, but who knows? It's a competitive race. We've got Sharp Distinction, who, unlike Dancing in the Woods, probably needs a bit of cut in the ground. He's entered at Yarmouth next week, but I think that's going to be touch and go whether he goes there because of the going. But what about BG Racing? Your other horse, Dynamic Kate, what's she up to?
Yeah, it sounds like we're going to different ends of the country on Saturday. If you're going to Haydock, I'm going to Foss Lass in South Wales. So,
whoa, okay.
Yeah, we were hoping to run her at Southall on the 24th of May, but the ground got a bit firm there. And as it's her first run back from a hairline fracture in her hind leg, we decided to wait for slightly softer ground. And it looks like we're going to get that at Foss Lass tomorrow, Saturday. So, yeah, again, same as you. Listeners will be able to see when this podcast goes out, we'll have both had a runner that has run in between recording and it going out. So they'll know how our horses got on, if they ran and how they ran.
Now, look, neither of us are likely to have a runner at Royal Ascot this year, but we both know Alan Crombie and John Hughes well through the RSA, the Racehorse Syndicate Association, and they're connected with El Caballo, a sprinter who's won 6 of his 7 starts, trained by Carl Burke, and he's a 6-1 shot for the Commonwealth Cup at the Royal Meeting. So we wish them luck at Ascot, as we do all syndicate runners. Speaking of Ascot, any fancies for there or the Derby meeting, Phil? Any thoughts?
Not really at this stage. I must admit, I tend to end up getting sort of stuck into outsiders with proven form under the race conditions, and therefore I do most of my work a bit nearer the time when I can see the markets and and the actual fields. So no, nothing at the moment. But what about you? Any fancies?
Well, look,